All right, welcome everyone. My name is Mikey, and this is the Talking to People in the Workplace workshop brought to you by the Animal Activism Mentorship Program. And we have our special guest for tonight. We got Mo Seyam. And man, this is so exciting. But before I bring in Mo, I just want to let you guys know that this workshop, like I said, is brought to you by the Animal Activism Mentorship Program. We are a nonprofit global organization that is here for you all to be more effective activists. So if you are thinking about being active, this is the program for you. If you're already active and wanting to explore more about other ways to be active or enhance your effectiveness, we are here to help. We are by no means professionals, but we want to make sure that we are sharing the information to you all so we can all just be better and be more effective speaking on behalf of the animals and maybe even going out there and liberating them, because awesome way to do things. But anyways, enough of me and enough of my introduction. It is now time to talk about this vegan who's been vegan for 7 years when he was inspired by his kung fu instructor, or sorry, kung fu instructors, multiple, to adopt a vegan lifestyle. He has participated in vigils in North Carolina with North Carolina Farmed Animal Save and motivated him to share his experiences with others. At his previous job, he started a vegan group called the Plant-Based Lifestyle Group that included about 120 members. This person also organizes vegan lunches at his workplace and organizes sanctuary workdays with his co-workers. So, without further ado, I bring you Mo Seyam. Take it away, Mo.
Thank you, Mikey, and thank you all for having me today. So I wanted to share some of my experiences with talking about animal rights in the workplace. I found it for myself when I first started doing it, it was kind of a hard thing to do just because at the workplace, you're worried, you may be worried about, getting in trouble. You might be worried about how your coworkers think of you and things like that. So I wanted to talk about different ways I kind of navigated that through my experience. So as Mikey said, I worked for a company for about 8 years. I left my job this past summer, mostly because I was doing my Kung Fu school at the same time, running classes. And when COVID hit, I kind of had to prioritize my Kung Fu school over the workplace. So I didn't have any issues with my workplace, but it was just more of I had to make that decision and do something for myself. But where I worked was a biotech company. So we made medicine for neurological diseases, prominently multiple sclerosis, and then recently was Alzheimer's. And when I first joined the company, I wasn't vegan. I was kind of in that transition phase. I was dabbling with vegetarianism. And then over time, I finally made that decision to go vegan. And it was mostly just for health. But as I started to attend different vegan events in the area, I started watching documentaries like Cowspiracy. And then as Mikey said, I started attending vigils. I felt this need to really share the information I was learning, right? It was difficult because, in the biotech industry and medicine in general, there's that animal exploitation piece of it, right? They're using animal products in the medicine, they're testing on animals, right? And so trying to introduce that into a company was kind of overwhelming at first, right? So it really started, where I really started thinking about it was when I started attending vigils. And I'd have to take work days, vacation days, half days to go to vigil. We have them usually in the afternoon. And it really kind of affected me a lot. As many of you have probably experienced if you've been to a vigil, over time, it really wears on you mentally, right? And so it was kind of hard, going to work and seeing people eating animals or, You have big barbecues. We've had Smithfield Barbecue come out, for events. And I just went to a Smithfield slaughterhouse vigil. Like, what am I doing here, right? And so I think my coworkers started kind of noticing, my face and how I was acting at work. And one day, one of my coworkers asked me, they were talking about, eating animal products. And they asked me, does it bother you that we're talking about this? And I said, honestly, yeah. And I started that day just talking about how I've been to vigils, how I've been to animal sanctuaries, and seeing that different dynamic where you see an animal that's living the life they should be versus seeing them about to go to slaughter. And so we just started having little discussions here and there. And then over time, I'd go to lunch with them and they'd come to me to a vegan restaurant and we'd talk about a little bit about veganism. They started trying out vegan foods and they start, seeing at first the health benefits, right? They're like, oh, I don't feel weighted down like I normally do when I eat lunch, right? And we start talking about maybe the health aspect. So one of the things I started doing was just having flyers at my desk, right? So Vegan Outreach has all kinds of different flyers about the environment, about the health aspects, and about even the animal rights aspect, right? So anytime anything came up, I was like, well, here's a flyer, here's a brochure that you can read, you can kind of look at this and see what resonates with you, right? So whatever subject you're talking about, you have a flyer that you can kind of hand to them and talk to them a little bit more about it. Over time, one of the biggest things that we prided ourselves on in this company was sustainability, environmentalism, right? And we had an EHS group. So EHS, Environmental Health and Safety. And of course, every year around April is right Earth Day. And I saw a poster where it said, here are the things you can do to be more environmentally friendly. Turn off your lights, use your water less, all the typical things that we hear. And it was frustrating to see that, right? So I was so prepared to get a Sharpie, just scratch it all out, right? But I saw an email address on there and it was for the director of EHS. And I was like, well, I've never really interacted with this group. I just kind of heard about them recently. So how about I just email them and let them know about my experiences? So I sent an email to our environmental health and safety group, and the director reached out to me. I didn't even say anything about veganism. So the way I worded it was, I have experience in sustainability. I have some experiences I want to share with you. Is there some time that we can meet? And then she was like, because we have our main site was in Cambridge. So she said, well, I'm coming down to Raleigh, North Carolina, where you are, in a couple of days. Do you want to meet up and talk about it? So I was like, all right, well, I got to throw something together really quick to kind of talk to this person about veganism. So what I try to do is not introduce veganism right away, but kind of word it in a way where it was more related to their sustainability efforts, and then introduce veganism when I got to meet with her in person. So I did a couple of things. One was kind of just telling my story about how I went vegan, why I went vegan, as Mikey kind of introduced earlier on. But then I also brought in different vegan treats, right? I brought in some cookies, I brought in some jerky, just to say, well, vegan food is pretty good, right? Here's different ways, and here's different things that maybe you're used to that's not vegan, but here's a vegan version of it, right? And I also put together a PowerPoint slide that was just kind of thrown together of my experiences, different facts from Cowspiracy, different facts from What the Health, and then even some pictures from vigils and from sanctuaries. And I asked the North Carolina Farm Animal Safe if I could use them. If I asked different sanctuaries in the area, can I use your images for this presentation I'm about to give? And they gave me permission to do so. And so I met with this director and one of the local EHS representatives, and I went through this presentation of why I went vegan and why it's important, and told them about the environmental aspects first, because that's what they're more working on, is a sustainability issue. But I also then went into some of the health aspects, right? Why it's important for the health. And then I showed them all the pictures from vigils, the ones that weren't as graphic, but still told that story, right? So I showed them some of those pictures, and it was kind of funny because the director said, well, I used to do protests with Greenpeace. And so we said I had that connection, right? It was kind of funny that we had that conversation. And then so what was really interesting too was she was actually thinking about starting a grassroots employee group at all the different sites. So our main site was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We had our site here in North Carolina, and then we had another site in Denmark. And so she wanted to have this kind of grassroots group in each of the sites and had an employee at each site to run each group. So she asked me if I wanted to be the one to run the group here in North Carolina. I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And so when we first started talking about this group and everything like that, she's like, this is great information, but maybe let's not talk about the animal portion right now. Let's just talk about the environmental aspect. Let's just talk about the health aspect, because the animal aspect might not resonate with people right now. So I said, okay, well, we'll try that. And so we had an interest meeting to begin with, where we had employees from all the different sites come in and talk about different projects they want to work on related to sustainability. And I introduced veganism at the time, just a brief summary of it. And I even, like as Mikey was saying, we had a vegan lunch. So I requested a vegan lunch for that meeting so that we didn't have any animal products, to really emphasize the importance of the sustainability aspect of veganism. And one of the first tasks that we took on was talking to our cafeteria. So many companies now have maybe a cafeteria that they can go to have a subsidized lunch, right? And so that's what our company did. We had a cafeteria within our company there where they subsidize the lunch for you. So you pay like a discounted price for your meals. So through that, I was able to connect with the director of the cafeteria, to the head chef of the cafeteria, and also with some employees that were interested in the environmental aspect. So I kind of did the same thing I did with the director of EHS. I had emailed this director of the cafeteria and asked, if we could meet. I want to talk about, maybe sustainable lunch options and things like that. Didn't even mention veganism in the email. And I took that similar presentation, but again, I took out that animal rights aspect, right? And so this is part of the reason I wanted to talk today, was to also describe some of the mistakes I made too, right? That I did as I was going through this process. And so when we met with the director of the cafeteria, and some of the other employees were interested and joined in, I started talking about veganism. I introduced the term vegan. I mentioned the sustainability aspect. I mentioned the health aspect, where a company that makes medicine, we should be promoting health, and this will be healthier options and things like that, right? And it turned into a disaster. There was all comments, bacon, 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 right? There was, we shouldn't tell employees what to eat, right? One person, and this was one of the things that threw me off guard because I hadn't known about it, right? This one person, she's like, well, I used to be vegan, but now I'm into regenerative farming. I buy from a regenerative farm, which I'd never heard of before at that point. And I was like, oh my God. It was just like everything that could have happened that was negative happened during this meeting. And it was just, I don't mind discussing things, right? But just that utter disrespect of just like saying bacon, bacon. I care about bacon. Or one person even said, when I hear the word vegan, I just shut down. I don't want to hear it. And it was just like defeating, right? So what they said they would do was they would label their vegan options better. I told the director of EHS what came of the meeting, and she said, well, that sounds like a good plan for now. We'll go with that. But it didn't sit well with me, right? And that was probably one of the more difficult experiences I had at a workplace, right? You have a lot of people attacking you, right? But then how do you kind of counter that, right? I kind of just sat there silently, and after the meeting, I didn't feel good about it at all. And so I reflected on the meeting and to really figure out, right, well, what would be my next step? Right? What could I have done better maybe? And when I thought about it more, just because somebody gets upset at you, right? And that's true of any kind of activism, doesn't mean that you should give up, right? Or doesn't mean that you lost, right? Because I realized the things they were saying weren't anything that I said. I just introduced, like, these are the different reasons for veganism. These are maybe some products we can introduce. But then they started saying, well, we shouldn't tell people not to eat meat. I never said that during the presentation. You just put that piece together, right? So that's kind of a win in a way, because now they're thinking about it. They're feeling guilty too, right? The bacon jokes, they had nothing else to contribute, right? So that was the only thing that they could contribute. And then one of the other things too, they said, because I had sources, for all my different things from Cowspiracy and from What the Health, they were saying, well, where did they get these sources from? Are they true sources? Are they legitimate sources, right? So I was thinking of ways, well, how can I work around that too? They didn't want to see it from me. So how else can I convince them, right? Convince others. So I knew that wasn't the path I needed to take. I needed to do something a little different. So as part of this group, this environmental health and sustainability group I was running, I decided to invite some speakers in. So we have at our company what was called Lunch and Learns. So you can, a lot of times it was more related to things about the company, like it might have been a patient coming in talking about their experiences with our medicines. It might be, we even had something about gender equality. Somebody came in from outside and talked about gender equality and pronouns and things like that. So I thought, well, why not utilize that system to create or bring in speakers to talk about different aspects of veganism. So I got back in touch with the director of EHS and told her, I want to do this workshop where somebody would come in and talk about, the health aspect. So I started with the health aspect of veganism. I found somebody local by asking people in the area, do you know anybody that can speak on the health aspects of veganism? And we found a local doctor who I got in touch with him, and he showed me his presentation. We talked a little bit before the meeting was officially set just to see what he wanted to talk about. So he primarily talked about the health aspect, but he also touched on the environmental aspect and the animal aspect too. And which was it was a great presentation that he put together. So we set it, and we did it in a way, we timed it where it was around the new year. So that way, because people are doing, their New Year's resolutions. And so we wanted to do something around health during the New Year's resolution. So let's put this health talk together at the beginning of the year. So I waited about maybe mid-January of that year so that people were coming back from vacation, they were settled in to work and everything like that. And then he came in, and when I first reserved the conference room that we were going to use, we had a room that would have maybe 50 people. Once I put out the announcement that we were going to do this, we had about 90 people sign up for this Lunch and Learn. So we had to get a bigger conference room. And we eventually, once he came in and gave his talk, it was about an hour long, all 90 people showed up. We also just did a vegan lunch. So our cafeteria did provide us a fully vegan lunch too. So that way people can experience vegan food while they're learning about the health aspects. And it turned out to be pretty good. I mean, there was some controversy at the end. Some people maybe didn't like the message. I saw some people go and buy some flesh products afterwards. And but for the most part, it got people talking, right? And it wasn't only coming from me, because I think one of the hardest things, right? You're always seeing your coworkers all the time. So if you're always the one talking about it, they're just hearing the same person over and over and over again. And sometimes you just need that extra person to come in, and whether they quote unquote called a professional or not, sometimes it's good to have somebody else come in and talk about it too. So that's another source of information, right? I think they say you need about 7 different sources saying the same thing to really lock in an idea. So if it's always coming from you, right, it might not necessarily click with someone, but if you're bringing in others to talk about it too, that's also an opportunity for that click to happen a little bit faster. So that was one of the motivations for me to do this Lunch and Learn. Now with that, I could tell that the director was getting a little uncomfortable with the things that I was doing and promoting. And so what I decided to do was kind of create another branch of this group. And so I was basically running 2 groups. I was running this environmental health and safety group, and then I was running this vegan group. So we called it the plant-based lifestyle, because people told me veganism would push people away. So let's use the word plant-based, right? Things like that. So even though we called it plant-based, we always promoted veganism through it. So how we created these groups, so in our company, we had something called communities of practice. So these were just different groups that really touched on different aspects of our company. So a lot of times they were things like how to speak up during a meeting in the workplace, how to be a strong leader, and things like that. So we kind of, within our company, were able to justify creating this group because we had an ethics, right? We were really strong about talking about ethics, right? So I kind of put that under that category of like, we care about our patients, we want them to be healthy, we care about our environment, we want to have a good environment, we want to also be an ethical company, right? So that's how I justified creating this group. So it was unfortunate because I was running 2 groups at the same time, so it started adding a lot of time. So I was trying to have somebody else take over the other group, but unfortunately I couldn't. So I focused a lot on this vegan group, and I didn't want people policing what I was saying, right? Because throughout this whole process, I've noticed that people didn't want me to talk about the animals, which was the most important part to me, right? And I think it is to most people. It's really talking about the animals. That's the important part. When I went to that meeting with the cafeteria group and the other employees, right? I didn't talk about the animals, but that would have been my justification. And I felt guilty for not talking about the animals, right? I didn't talk about the animals when we were doing this health aspect of the presentation, but we brought it up a little bit. So I wanted to create my own group so that I could be able to speak, right? I think that's the thing. And we always notice that in activism, right? People try to tell us how we should say things, even though they themselves are not vegan, they're trying to tell us how we should talk to them, right? And it's the same thing in the workplace. They're going to tell you, this is what you should say. This is how you should say it. And I tried it at first and it didn't work, right? People just still ignored the real issues. So that was my motivation to continue and create this new group, was to really not be policed and to be told what I should be saying and what should I be doing. We try to keep it as professional as we can be, right? Of course, but not to be policed on not talking about the animal rights, right? So when Earth Month came back around in April, we had Brother Wolf come in because they were working on the Save the Animals, Save the Earth campaign. And so they gave a talk and they talked about the environmental aspect of veganism. Again, we had a fully vegan lunch and we had about 40 people attend that. So from all over the company. And that was another kind of meeting where a lot more people were kind of discussing things and really were learning more about the environmental aspect and were interested in it. And then the final piece I wanted to do was bringing in the animal piece, right? So that was the tricky part. How do I bring up talking about animals and animal rights in the workplace? And so to do that, I invited one of our sanctuaries to come in and talk. So Piedmont Farm Animal Refuge here in North Carolina was one of the first sanctuaries I've been to. And I had Lenore, the founder, come in and talk about the animals, right? And that was one of the ones that was, for me, when I first set it up, was kind of the scary one, right? Because again, how is that going to look to your coworkers? Especially because I have a lot of coworkers, you may too, that have like backyard chickens, right? And they're always talking about how they're raising their chickens for eggs and for things like that. And Lenore here is going to tell you about why that's a bad thing, right? So are you going to offend people? Are you going to get people upset, right? And so when she came in and she really talked about the sanctuary and talked about the animals and what happens in the industry and why we shouldn't have chickens, why we shouldn't have sheep, why we shouldn't have all these different animals as products. And I thought at first I was like, it's going to be everyone's going to be in an uprise, right? But it actually turned out really well. Like people asked really good questions. Like we had a sheep that was pregnant that came to the sanctuary and gave birth. And unfortunately she had passed away, and people were asking, well, did the farmer know she was pregnant, right? Why was she given away to an auction? And people were asking, well, what would be an ideal world for you, right? And things like that. It really opened up a good conversation. So nobody got upset, nobody got angry or anything like that. I didn't get into trouble with any of these lunch and learns. And so the way these lunch and learns work too, where we got funding from our department. So it was very limited too. So the next step was, well, how can I keep things going throughout the year, right? Because we were only basically limited to 1 or 2 lunch and learns a year, but how do I keep that momentum going? So one of the things I set up, and a lot of companies do this too, you can set up on their website, Workdays at a nonprofit, right? And you can actually do a couple things with this website that we had. You can either donate directly to a nonprofit and then they'll match your donations, or you could set up Workdays and then they'll give you volunteer money that you can actually apply and then send to whatever nonprofit you want to. So that's something I never even heard of. I didn't know about it until I started kind of exploring more through the company's website and through some of these different groups that I was working with. So through this website, I set up these different sanctuary workdays. And to kind of motivate people to come, I did a couple things. So one was setting up or bringing in lunch during the workdays. So that way people came in and they didn't have to worry about food, and then they had an opportunity. Everyone likes free food, right? So we brought in food. And then we also had an award system at our company. So I basically put people's name in a raffle, said you'll get a $50 award if you show up, and you'll be entered into this drawing for a $50 award. So throughout the year, we did 4 work days, so once each quarter. And we had pretty wide variety of people coming in. So usually about 4 or 5 people showed up to these work days. And it was pretty much all the time somebody different came to each work day. And the way we set it up, so we would have lunch first, and then we would do our work for a couple hours, and then they got a tour at the end of the sanctuary. So now you're bringing the people, your coworkers, to the sanctuary so they can see the animals in person and actually really learn, right, about those different aspects. Why it's not okay to use a chicken, why it's not okay to use sheep, why it's not okay to use ducks and things like that. And it really, especially because we have here in North Carolina a lot of farms and farmland, and people use animals all the time. So people come up with questions, well, what about humane dairy, right? And then, well, these animals here came from a humane dairy farm, right? So do you think this was okay for them to go through this, right? Now somebody else is talking about it. Now they can see it in person, not just watch a documentary or watch a movie. It's not just you telling them, now they're seeing them in person, right? So those were some of the things that I kind of implemented as I went through this group. And then over time, it was kind of cool to see some of the thinking shift of people. Some people I never thought would ever even consider veganism. Even got to the point where one of my coworkers actually suggested doing a sanctuary workday as part of our team building. So in our company, we try to do team buildings where maybe we'll do an activity together and then we'll have lunch or dinner later in the day. And so one of my coworkers was like, well, can we go to one of your sanctuaries and do a work day there? I was like, yeah, sure. Let me contact them and let's set it up. And we went to Ziggy's Refuge. I have their shirt on right now. And we did team building by building fences. They were having to build some fences around their perimeter. And so we helped them with that project, doing painting and setting up and putting up the fencing and everything like that too. And then they got to meet the animals again. And it was a cool experience because it wasn't just me talking about it. Now it's them asking to do these activities too, right? So again, now you have that outside person, the sanctuary, talking to others about veganism. It's not just you talking about it all the time. So I started seeing these different changes in people's personalities, or people talking about veganism more. One of the things we did, so going back to those communities of practice, right? So the communities of practice, again, were different groups of people that were running different aspects. Like I was running the vegan group, and other people working on things like how to be a better leader, how to talk during a meeting, things like that. We would once a year have kind of a workshop where people can come in. We have a poster session and people can come in and learn about these different communities of practice. And one of the things they wanted to do was have ice cream, right? To entice people to come in, and you have to talk to 3 different groups to get a free cup of ice cream. So one of the things I asked for was, can we have non-dairy ice cream? And they said, yeah, we could do that. But the first time we did that session, they didn't have the non-dairy ice cream. And I was going to write to them and say something, but what's funny was one of my non-vegan coworkers went and said, what happened? There's no non-dairy ice cream. I was looking forward to it. Right? I was like, I didn't even have to say anything. So it was kind of cool to see that. But again, it wasn't all positive. At the second poster session, I had somebody come up to me. He was a supervisor, and he saw all these different pamphlets that I had from vegan outreach. And he just started kind of getting a little belligerent, right? He was like, well, I'll eat this animal, but I won't eat this animal, right? I have this animal, I can give you a dog. I'll kill this pig if you want me to, right? Just started getting angry. And trying to be professional as I could be. I was like, well, that's not okay. And this is why we shouldn't be doing this. A dog is not different from a pig, right? And so trying to kind of navigate that in a workplace is kind of a hard thing to do, right? You don't want to, again, be that belligerent person, be that person to get angry and to get upset and then to be the one that gets in trouble, right? You want to be that person to kind of just give facts, give information, but without, again, trying to make yourself look upset and things like that. And I was telling Mikey earlier today too, there were times where people thought I was being too much. I was talking about activism too much. We had a new person come in and he started talking about there was cupcakes in the break room. And I said, no, I'm good and everything like that. And then my boss of all people said, well, Mo doesn't eat dairy. And I was like, well, I didn't want to bring it up because I knew I was going to be pissed off to begin with. And I just didn't really want to talk about it then. But then it got brought up and then I said, well, we shouldn't be eating dairy and all this stuff. And he started kind of like, well, I like milk, blah, blah, blah. So the next day my boss pulls me in. He's like, well, you were a little confrontational there. He's a new employee. We should be welcoming him and things like that. And I was like, fine, maybe I do need to be a little bit more professional, quote unquote, but I'm not going to stop talking about animals. I mean, that's the ethical thing, right? So I kind of pushed back on my boss a little bit too. So basically what I'm trying to get at is don't let anybody silence you, right? Speak your truth, speak, right, your knowledge, speak your, with your heart, with your passion, with your soul, right? Because that's the only thing you can do, right? I mean, you might be talked to, your boss might be upset at you, right? Your coworkers might get upset at you, but the thing we got to do is keep our truth and keep honest, right? So there were a couple other things and kind of this health organization type of thing, medicine organization I wanted to try to do, but I never got to do, but just to give you some ideas of what I was kind of thinking of. So basically my message to everyone is to really be creative and to find those different outlets, right? Because you never know how big something can go. I was talking to my coworkers one day, and then all of a sudden I have a group of 120 people that wanted to learn more about veganism, right? And so here are some of the things I was like, well, what are my next steps? I'm starting to get people to talk about and learn about veganism. Like, what are other things I wanted to do? And these are things either I couldn't find the right person to talk to, or because I ended up leaving the company, I didn't get a chance to implement. So one thing I wanted to do was to be able to show documentaries at the workplace, right? We had the lunch and learns, but trying to figure out a good time frame, right? Should I do it during lunch? Because a lot of them are an hour and a half. Would that be enough time for people to watch a documentary? Or should I do it after work sometime? Because we had monthly movie showings, right, at the end of the day. So would people stay during the end of the day to come watch a documentary, or did they want to watch a fun movie, right? So I was trying to find that time frame. I never got to implement it, but it was one of those things. I was like, how can I bring that to the workplace? During my whole process, one of the things one of the groups I got in touch with was Plant Pure Nation. And they reached out to me a few times and told me that they actually have a corporate program where employees can get discounted meals from them. So since we always have this health and wellness benefit fair, so where we come in and talk about different benefits that we get, whether it's health insurance, whether it's dental insurance, things like that. They check our vitals and everything like that. And as part of that, I was trying to get in touch with somebody to see if we can get this program where Plant Pure Nation could provide vegan meals for people at a discounted rate, and that would be delivered directly to their home, so that way if they have time to cook, or if they don't know how to cook vegan meals, they have something sent directly to their house. So I was trying to find somebody to get in touch with, but that never ended up working out. But that's something that Plant Pure Nation does have. So if that's something you want to maybe promote to your company, that's something you could do. Oh, and then one of our groups was the patient services group, right? So as I've kind of looked into veganism, right, we realized that plant-based diet is really good for helping slow down the progression of multiple sclerosis, which is one of the diseases we were working on. So I wanted to really get with our, again, patient services group to really say, hey, can we implement a program for our patients where they can learn and get more understanding of a plant-based diet and how that might help them with their multiple sclerosis. So again, it was something I didn't get to implement, but it was something I was thinking about trying to do as I was going through the company. And then the biggest project I wanted to do, which I don't know how I would have approached it, but was trying to also, nowadays we have alternatives to animal testing, right? And so that was one of the big things that our company did, was test on animals, not necessarily on our site. They went to a third-party site, but how to kind of introduce that, right? Trying to find ways that we can promote not using animals for testing and things like that. So those were some of the thoughts and things I was going through as I was going through this group and figuring out, well, who can I get in touch with? How can I use the company's resources to be able to promote veganism? So very good. So that's everything I have to say. And I guess at this point, we'll take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mo. I really appreciate like all the information that you provide us and help us out in order for us to be more effective with talking to people in the workplace.
Sure.
But like what you said, Mo, now it is our portion for question and answer. But first, I just want to again mention that this is brought to you by the Animal Activism Mentorship, nonprofit global organization that is here for you to make you the most effective activists for the animals that you can be, because we need more, really. We need more animal rights activists and animal liberationists to just have a better world, and who does not want to have a better world, right? So now, question and answer portion, open to all questions. While for the question, you can just go ahead and unmute or just put in the chat if you want to go and queue yourself up. But I want to say one thing real quick, Mo, is that when you mentioned team building with building fences, is that the same one that we use for the graphic?
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yeah, so that graphic that I had sent you, that was from our team building exercise with my coworkers.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to pull that up here in a second while people are putting in their questions.
Sure.
Any questions for Mo? All right, I'll ask another question while people are queuing up for questions.
Sure.
When you mentioned that, like how well received it was having flyers and like vegan snacks at your work area, so that's with you having a desk and having those things available, right?
Right.
What if someone's at a workplace that is more in like a maybe an industrial type of scenario, so not an office workspace, so no place to have flyers available or to like bring in treat? What's your suggestion on that one?
So I would say probably the best thing to do would be if you had your coworker's email address or anything like that, you can maybe email them some resources if they seem interested, or just provide them some links. I think that would be the easiest way. Now, I think even then you could probably even go to lunch with your coworkers. So you could probably have some in your car. Yeah, there you go. Somebody just said it too. So have the flyers in your car available, and then maybe after work or during lunch or something, you could hand it to them. So I think I saw somebody on the chat was asking about what my job was. So I worked at a biotech company. We made medicine for neurological diseases like multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's. So I worked on the manufacturing floor for a bit, making the medicine itself. And then my last job there was working on the documentation piece, so writing the instructions for making the medicine.
All right, so I'm going to share that. I'm just going to ask a question while I'm like getting my composure here.
Sure.
So I thought it was smart that you brought like outside party to talk about animal rights, veganism, whatnot, right? Because it's not just like you and you're engaging with your coworkers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually having a fresh perspective that's, like a third party type of stuff. So a little bit more susceptible to like listening.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be real.
Right.
Not that you're not effective with talking to people about animal rights, right?
Yeah, that's another.
But, so with the talking to the cafeteria director that you mentioned a while ago, how do you keep your composure when they start talking about like you mentioned like about the bacon and stuff? So how do you stay positive and stay professional during those times?
Yeah, that was a really tough thing for me. So I'm an introvert, so I'm not the type of person to just like say things when things are thrown at me. I usually have to process things before I can say anything back. So basically all I did for that was, just even though I was upset and even though I was angry, I just kind of sat back, just let them say what they wanted to say. I knew at that moment that they weren't ready to listen. So it didn't matter what I was going to say at that point. They just didn't want to hear it, right? So it wouldn't have made sense for me to say anything just because it would just come off as aggressive. It could have just came off as upsetting. It could have been, they might have reported me to the HR or whatever, right? So it's really, I think in those kind of cases, just to just sit back, let them say what they have to say, just recognize that even though they're upset, they are thinking about it, right? And just that you can't do anything at that point, but just let them say what they have to say and then just move on. I think there was a question about the doctor. So there was a Dr. Jonathan Sheeline was the name of the doctor that came in to talk about, I'll put his name in the chat here. He works with PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So he does a lot of Q&A type of things, and he started his own practice. I'm not sure if he has done, okay, so Rob does know him. Yeah, so yeah, he was the one that came in to talk about the health benefits of veganism. And then Dana, for your question, yeah, so typically, yes, every medication and vaccine has to be tested on animals, but there are companies at the moment that are working on alternatives to animal testing. So they're creating like different chips and things like that, where you can, instead of using the animal, using these different little chips and things like that. And then even with the COVID vaccine now, they even skipped the animal testing step completely just to get it out early. So I think we are kind of progressing in that direction overall. And it depends on the country too, right? Every country has a different rules and regulations to it. But here in the US, I can kind of see a little bit of a shift. And when I started seeing these different technologies coming out, that was one of the things I wanted to present to, I don't even know who it would have been, to the company, to see if that was something that we could implement over time.
All right, I'm gonna steal the show real quick and share the screen. Yeah, see that? So there's Mo. There's the crew looking all happy with paint on their hands. You can kind of like see it over there.
Yeah. So the person in red there, he was the one next to me on my, if you look to one person to the right, that was the one who suggested the other one.
This one?
Yeah.
That wearing a red shirt, like you said.
Yeah. He was the one that suggested doing the sanctuary workday for our team building.
And go ahead. And I gotta say, that's not a lot of thing, or that's not a common thing for us to think about. Is like, hey, why don't we take our coworkers to, to a sanctuary? Because it's usually like, kind of get like other like animal rights activists or like vegan groups to go to these things, but not so much like pull coworkers to help volunteer, which I think is brilliant because you're putting them in a situation where they're in a different setting, looking at a different perspective out of their own accord, through their lens, instead of like just us engaging in conversation. Yeah, you're putting them in that setting where they're seeing what we have talked about before, and like that there's like a peaceful world, and this is like the snapshot glimpse of it. That it's achievable.
Right, and I haven't had coworkers. We never did it, but they even wanted to come to vigils with me after I started talking about what we did, and they never actually came out, but they were interested in seeing it too. So yeah.
Is it because of COVID they didn't come out?
It was before that.
Okay.
I think it was just more of a time thing than anything that happened, but seems like Julia wants to share a little bit of experience. That's right, Mikey.
All right, cool. So I just wanted to share some inspiration too about my work experience. So I work at a restaurant, which is probably what you would think. It's not a vegan restaurant, would be one of the most hardest experiences for getting active there, sharing. And, I've been there for going on 3.5 years. And of course, I've been an activist for 14 years. And, when I first started, I would hit all this, bacon, really push back. And I just thought, wow, I'm never going to get through to these people. Like, we serve animal products there. Of course, with customers, I've had a lot more success. A lot of my regulars have gone vegan. They allow me to do outreach if the customer asks about, what would you suggest? Oh, I'm vegan, or I don't support animal cruelty or whatever, and then I can go into that. They allow that. But so one of the things that happened recently was they've given everybody a turkey or a ham for the holidays, like all of the employees. And last year, I've always asked, like, could you get me a tofurkey or something plant-based instead? Can you guys at least do that? And they were like, oh no, we get them in cases. And of course I run Smithfield Pig Save. And so last year, they gave everybody a ham from Smithfield. And I just broke down and was like, this is bullshit. Like, you can't even get me a tofurkey or one less ham. Like, this is crazy. They're like, well, you can donate yours to a shelter. And so I thought, like, oh my God. And I thought, I'm just not making any progress. And this year they pulled me aside and they said, because we know that one gift doesn't fit all, we decided to no longer give the ham or turkey and do gift cards instead. And so instead of just saving one animal from, being given as a gift to the employees, we have over 50 employees. So no longer 50 animals will no longer have to die for their employee gift, which I thought was really cool. And then another thing that happened was the head chef is he's a piece of work, and he will really come at me and not, you know, really push those buttons that makes you just want to be like, you know, instead of even trying, just fuck you, which is really hard to not do when they just push you so hard. But he came up to me 2 days ago and said, hey, I want to let you know that I really have heard what you said, and I'm almost 100% dairy free now. I don't buy any milk, and now I'm on almond or oat milk. All of the suggestions that I've heard you tell people, I tried them and I thought they were great. And I just wanted you to know that even though I'm not there 100%, I'm about 90% there. And I just thought this person would never, not only were they not receptive, but I just thought they were a horrible person. And so it's cool to see, even after it, you know, it takes maybe 3 years. There's no opportunity for me to bring in a speaker. Like, there's no opportunity for me to do a lot of things that you do, which is so inspiring. But even in a place where there's such little hope and light to even bring in, change can happen. So yeah, thanks for your presentation, and
Awesome.
very inspiring. Yeah.
And yeah, and really the purpose of the presentation too was just like you're saying, is to be really creative in finding those opportunities in your company, right? No matter whether you're at a restaurant, whether you're working at a corporate job or whatever it may be, you know, finding those little opportunities to speak up.
Yeah, and then
Right.
just lastly too, just one more thing, sorry.
Okay.
For my birthday, they do like employee birthday stuff. They donated $400 to a sanctuary this past year.
That's awesome.
So even though they're selling animal products, they've now helped a sanctuary. So anyways, that's it.
That's amazing, Julia. Thank you. All right, Brian, we see your comment. You're welcome to come on in and share. I do want to let everyone know that we don't have a lot of time left, so we have we can do one more question after Brian or story, but we would love to hear from someone that hasn't got a chance to share yet. So with that being said, no pressure while Brian is talking. Take it away,
Alright,
Brian.
I'm on a timer. That's fine. That's okay. I just wanted to let Mo know I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing what you're doing at work there. That's pretty awesome. I'm not going to say where I work, but I work for a company that I when I outreach at work, I kind of outreach on a one-on-one basis. I never really thought of, you know, thinking outside the box. I never really thought about, you know, going direct to the company. I noticed, you know, all the vending machines in my plant, I can't eat out of these vending machines. And I never really thought about going to my company and, you know, mention this. So this is really opening up, you know, ideas for me too. So I'm definitely going to speak maybe to someone in my company that deals with the vendor about putting maybe some plant-based alternatives in there. And then also on top of that, I love the sanctuary idea because you know, I volunteer on a sanctuary in Lawrence, Kansas, Shy 38. You can check them out on Facebook. And I love the idea of the non-profit volunteering from work. That is amazing. And I love also the idea of the tour at the end where we explain why we don't eat these animals. So again, appreciate you coming on and helping people think outside the box.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, who's our lucky last person? Come on down. See, love to hear from Felix.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. Here, I'll put the camera on as well. I'm not sure if I have a lot of advice. I just have some experiences. I work in a place where it hasn't been the most supportive work environment. The kind of typical thing we'll do is we'll all gather together at the lunch table. And I've had experiences like multiple coworkers around me discussing how they were planning to visit a local farmer and have a cow butchered for them to share. So I eventually ended up taking the Liberation Pledge, in part just because I couldn't deal with that sort of environment anymore. I did have one positive experience, which was that the first sort of Christmas or holiday dinner that we had after taking the pledge, I knew there wasn't going to be a vegan table and that there'd be no way I could really attend and still uphold the pledge. And so I ended up passing on attending. And then the first day I was back at my desk after the holidays, I came back to my desk, found a gift card for a local vegan restaurant with a message saying, "Merry Christmas, even though you couldn't eat with us, you're appreciated, and thanks for all you do." So even though it's not the best work environment, sometimes they still find ways to surprise me.
Yeah, and that was some of the experiences I've had too. We one of my coworkers had retired, and he wanted to do. They had a turkey lunch for him, right? And literally, like a few days before that, I had helped one of the sanctuaries. They had come into my town to take one of their turkeys to have surgery for their bumblefoot, right? And I was like, I can't go to this lunch when I just literally helped a turkey go through surgery. Like, this doesn't make sense. I told my boss that. I told my boss's boss that. I'm like, I'm not going to this retirement party. I'll sign a card or whatever, but I'm not going. So sometimes just even sitting back from a work function that you don't have to attend, and saying, I can't support this is fine too.
I mean, the one thing that helps is that I do a lot of activism away from work. So it helps me fulfill that role. Because I know it wouldn't necessarily be appreciated where I work. I'll do small things like I work in IT, so kind of like with Facebook, you can set a particular thing as your cover photo and so on. So for my email logo that everybody will see when they get an email from me, it'll say something like keep calm, plants have protein, or I'll change it up every so often just so that the message gets out there without being in their face, because I know I can't push the limits much further than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the key, is to always do what you can, right? And to, when one door closes, just go that opposite direction. Like Rob was saying, it's trying to do a lunch and learn and couldn't get the speaker. I mean, like that was a problem I had too. Like when I first did my first lunch and learn with Dr. Ashiline, the director didn't want to pay for him to come speak because he asked for like a small $150 fee, which we're $1 billion corporation, so $150 is nothing, right? But she didn't want to pay it, and I could kind of tell she didn't want to do it. So I had to find another director that, and it was actually my boss's boss that ended up helping pay for it. And so sometimes you just have to find another person that could sponsor that lunch and learn.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Felix, thank you so much for hopping on audio and video. I know I just put you on the spot on that one, but really appreciate it. And thanks for sharing it. You brought a lot to the table. And the whole idea too of the Liberation Pledge, how does that play into the workplace? So it's very difficult, but that's what's amazing about you guys. You guys are rock stars. You are keeping with your convictions on the animal rights forefront always. I know it's kind of a tricky thing with the workplace with your coworkers that you see day in and day out, but you put forward what's the real importance. So thanks, everyone, and thank you, Mo, for sharing your wisdom and some tips and tricks on how to engage with people at the workplace. It's not just a direct thing. It's not just like me and then you, me and then another coworker. You know, there's other techniques. So amazing. Thank you so much, Mo. Thank you for your time. Like I said, this has been brought to you by the Animal Activism Mentorship. All of you, this is it. This is the end. You guys made it. And you all will automatically be charged $0 to your account because this is for free. And if you guys want to see more free stuff from the Animal Activism Mentorship, don't forget to follow us on social media. I put it on the chat that on our link tree that has our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And this workshop is going to be uploaded within 24 hours. So you guys will see it there and get to see Mo's face again within 24 hours. So thanks, everyone. That is it. Have a great one.
Thank you, everyone.